What if everything you've been taught about feminine kindness is a lie? What if behind every gentle smile, every soft gesture, every nurturing word lies something far colder, far older than we're willing to admit? Friedrich Nietzsche didn't look away from that possibility. He stared directly into it. For him, the idea that women are naturally more compassionate, more moral, or more innocent was not just false. It was dangerous. Not because women are evil, but because the myths we build around them prevent us from seeing their real power. In a world obsessed with equality, Nietzsche's insights cut like a blade. He didn't argue that men and women are the same. He didn't even argue that they should be. Instead, he exposed something deeper, more primal. How women wield power, not through force, but through suggestion, emotion, and instinctual cunning. He saw cruelty not as a masculine trait, but a human one, expressed differently by gender, but present in both. Women, he believed, are not weak. They are not fragile. They are not victims of history. They are agents of nature, its quiet enforcers, operating beneath the surface of civilization, shaping its movements without ever appearing to. This is not a condemnation. It's not an accusation. It's a confrontation, a stripping away of illusions that we've layered over instinct and desire. Nietzsche wasn't interested in making you feel comfortable. He wanted you to see the forces that actually drive behavior, relationships, and power. So the question is not whether women are cruel. The question is why we refuse to admit it, and what happens, both to men and women, when that cruelty is hidden beneath the mask of virtue. This is not a story of hate. It is a story of truth, and it begins where most are afraid to look. Nietzsche didn't believe in appearances. He believed in drives, raw, hidden, often brutal. And for him, the essence of woman was not found in the image of the loving mother or the loyal wife. It was found in the instinct to survive at any cost. He argued that the feminine nature was not morally superior, but more concealed, more strategic, more deeply aligned with life's unconscious will to power. Kindness, affection, even innocence, these were not expressions of selfless love, but tools, sharpened over centuries, to secure protection, loyalty, and control without confrontation. To Nietzsche, woman was not weak because she lacked strength. She was strong precisely because she didn't rely on it. In his eyes, women mastered the art of appearing harmless while never forgetting the fundamental need to endure. Where men might charge forward, blinded by ego or idealism, women advanced quietly, using charm, vulnerability, and ambiguity to ensure their survival. This wasn't deceit. It was nature in its most elegant form. He believed that woman was closer to the pulse of life itself, less diluted by abstract values, and more in tune with the silent undercurrent that moves all living things, the need to prevail. This made her neither better nor worse than man, but more dangerous in a subtle way. Because while men fought openly for power, Nietzsche saw women wielding theirs without ever admitting they had it. In this, he found a kind of honesty, but not the kind society praises. It was the honesty of instinct, of the will that does not speak, but acts, the will that hides in softness, but strikes when needed. Nietzsche wasn't condemning this. He was revealing it, exposing a form of power few dared to name, and even fewer dared to understand. Seduction is often misunderstood as romance, softness, or emotional depth. But beneath the surface, it's something far more calculated. It's not about love, it's about influence. Seduction is not merely the art of attraction, it is the silent manipulation of desire, a strategy that rewires the intentions of others without ever appearing forceful. The one who seduces does not chase. She waits. She allows the other to believe they are in control, all while steering the outcome. There is no violence in this form of control, no raised voice or demand. That is its brilliance. It works precisely because it doesn't look like power. It looks like surrender, like beauty, like softness. But behind it is a precise awareness of timing, vulnerability, and the value of being desired. When a man pursues, he reveals himself, his aims, his weaknesses, his need. But the one being pursued remains concealed. In seduction, the true center of power lies with the one who does less. It is not love that creates the bond, but uncertainty, the allure of what cannot be fully grasped. In this game, cruelty is not expressed with words. It's expressed with absence, with silence, with just enough attention to keep hope alive. The ability to give and withhold, to reveal and conceal, to allow the other to burn while remaining untouched. That is the essence of seduction's cruelty. This isn't a flaw. It's not even personal. It's a reflection of instinct, a method of survival dressed in elegance. What looks like passion is often just strategy, and what we call heartbreak is not always betrayal. It's often the result of a game one never realized they were playing. Seduction is not about connection. It's about control, and it rarely leaves the one who uses it unchanged. Morality is often praised as a universal compass, a sign of virtue, a mark of civilization. But not all morality is born from truth. Sometimes it's a disguise, a way to hide will behind rules and desire behind virtue. Throughout history, women have often been cast as the moral backbone of society, gentle, forgiving, selfless. But this image, repeated enough, becomes less a reflection of character and more a tactic of perception. What appears as compassion can be a form of control. The subtle enforcement of guilt, the unspoken expectation of behavior, the ability to wound without ever raising a hand. The moral woman is not always one who simply follows the rules. She is often the one who decides who has broken them. Her power lies not in declaring authority, but in shaping the social atmosphere where actions are judged. She does not need to fight openly. She can isolate, exclude, disapprove, all without appearing cruel, because it is done in the name of decency. This power is most effective because it cannot be questioned without consequence. To challenge the moral figure is to appear immoral yourself, and so her authority is protected by the very values she claims to uphold. No demand, no threat, just the slow tightening of social pressure until the target breaks or submits. It is a different kind of cruelty, one that wounds the soul rather than the body. This morality does not aim to liberate, it aims to organize, to structure the world around safety, reputation, and predictable behavior. In doing so, it often sacrifices honesty, complexity, and desire. It punishes risk and rewards conformity, not always for justice, but for control. And what looks like virtue may, in truth, be the quiet enforcement of fear wrapped in the language of goodness. Not all power needs to be loud. In fact, the most enduring kind rarely announces itself. It doesn't take the form of orders or declarations. It seeps in, unnoticed, shaping choices without force. This is the kind of power that often goes unnoticed in women, not because it is absent, but because it is quiet, indirect, and deeply effective. It is the power to influence without seeming to lead, to guide decisions without appearing responsible for them. This kind of control doesn't operate through dominance, it operates through necessity, through being needed, missed, depended on. A glance, a pause, a refusal to answer, these become tools, more effective than any command. And because this power is so carefully hidden, it is almost impossible to resist. without looking cruel or unstable in return. The more subtle the influence, the less it can be challenged. No one can strike back against what they can't see. It isn't about deceit, it's about survival. Those denied formal authority must find power where they can. Over centuries, this kind of influence became instinct, not something taught, but something deeply embedded. How to suggest without demanding, how to correct without punishing, how to win without appearing to compete. It may look like passivity, but it is anything but passive. Soft power is often dismissed because it doesn't leave scars you can see, but it leaves marks all the same, shaping paths, curving wills, rewriting plans. It is not weaker than direct power. It is just harder to trace, and perhaps more dangerous for that reason. Because when power wears a smile, it becomes harder to name, harder to resist, and almost impossible to hold accountable. What seems harmless often isn't. What seems delicate can be the sharpest edge of all. In every human bond, emotion is the undercurrent, felt, but often unseen. It's what moves people to act against logic, to stay when they should leave, to believe when they know better. And in this emotional realm, women have long held a kind of quiet mastery, not because they are more fragile, but because they understand its weight, how to bend it, press it, and use it when words would fail. Tears, silence, disappointment. These are not always reactions. Sometimes they are signals. Sometimes they are tools. Emotional expression becomes a kind of language, one not easily translated, but deeply understood. A glance can wound. A sigh can shift an entire conversation. Not through confrontation, but through the burden it places on the other to restore peace. The one who feels more does not always suffer more. Often, they lead. It's not about dishonesty. It's about knowing what moves people, what stops them. It's about shaping the emotional tone of a moment so that others adapt to it. This is not weakness, it's precision. When physical strength or authority is out of reach, influence must take another path, one that flows through empathy, guilt, tenderness, or fear. And once someone feels responsible for your pain, they're no longer thinking clearly. They're no longer free. The greatest manipulations are not the ones we recognize. They are the ones we call love, compassion, or care. But even kindness can be weaponized when it becomes a test, a measurement, a quiet demand. Emotional leverage does not need to shout. It only needs to make the other feel enough. Enough doubt, enough guilt, enough hope. That's the trap. Because once your actions are no longer your own, once they exist only to ease another storm, you've already given up the ground you thought you were standing on. Desire rarely belongs entirely to the one who feels it. It reflects, it echoes, it adapts itself to what is allowed, what is shown, what is withheld. And in the realm of desire, women have learned not to pursue it directly, but to shape it by becoming its mirror. What is reflected back is not always who they are, but who the other wants them to be. This is not deception, it's survival. A quiet agreement between appearance and expectation. To be desired is to hold power without asking for it. It demands nothing and offers everything on the surface. But that surface is constructed with intention. Every word, gesture, and silence builds a version of the self that draws others in, not through force, but through suggestion, through possibility, through becoming the answer to a longing not fully understood, even by the one who longs. It's not just beauty that captivates. It's timing. It's restraint. It's the ability to be present, yet unreachable. The moment someone starts chasing, they've already lost control. They start giving, proving, adjusting, while the other simply watches, choosing when and if to respond. This isn't a game. It's a mechanism, a dynamic forged through centuries, where safety often came from attraction, not authority. And the paradox is this: the less a woman reveals, the more power she holds. Because mystery does not invite understanding, it invites projection. And what people project, they fall in love with. Not the real person, but the reflection of their own desire, shaped and handed back to them. That illusion is stronger than truth. It survives longer. It leaves deeper marks. Because in the mirror, people see not just what they want, but what they fear losing. And that, more than anything, is what keeps them close. Power does not always enter with noise. It often arrives dressed as comfort, concern, or care. It speaks softly. It listens more than it speaks. And it makes you believe that you are choosing freely, until you realize the path was laid for you from the beginning. This is not the power of command, but of guidance disguised as suggestion. It feels like trust, like intimacy. And yet, it bends your will more completely than force ever could. Control, when direct, invites resistance. But when it hides itself in empathy, it becomes something else entirely. A quiet redirection, a shift of priorities, a planted hesitation. It doesn't need to say, "Don't do that." It only needs to say, "It worries me when you do." And suddenly, your own choices begin to feel like betrayals. Not because they are wrong, but because they threaten the emotional stability of someone close to you. Over time, this form of influence weaves itself into everyday decisions. You stop acting on impulse. You calculate how each move will be received. You anticipate disappointment before it happens, and so you avoid it, not out of fear, but out of obligation to peace. This is how power lives inside affection, how authority hides in love. You're not being ordered, you're being understood. You're not being told what to do. You're being reminded what matters. But slowly, what matters stops being your own. The line between kindness and control blurs. The grip tightens, not with force, but with meaning. The more someone becomes the center of your emotional world, the easier it is for them to reshape it. Not with demands, but with quiet expectations. Not through domination, but through presence. That's the genius of soft control. It never has to ask for power. It already has it. In a world that rewards the appearance of innocence, victimhood becomes a form of influence. Not because the pain isn't real, but because suffering, when witnessed, commands attention, sympathy, and most of all, power. There is a subtle authority in being wronged, a shield that deflects criticism, a weapon that cannot be seen, only felt. And once it is invoked, it cannot be challenged without risking moral exile. In this framework, to be hurt is to be righteous. To be wounded is to be believed. Emotion takes the place of evidence, and narrative overrules nuance. A single tear has more weight than 1,000 arguments. This isn't manipulation in the overt sense. It's the social code rewritten to favor the one who appears harmed over the one who may be right. Truth becomes less important than impact. It's not always conscious. The role is learned early: how to soften anger into sadness, how to shift from confrontation to retreat, how to accuse without speaking directly. The message is always the same: look what you've done to me. And when others look, they rarely ask what came before. Sympathy flows faster than judgment. Protection arrives before verification. But this isn't weakness. It's strategy, in a world where direct aggression from women is still frowned upon, but vulnerability is praised. So strength disguises itself. The moral high ground becomes the throne. Emotional harm becomes the currency, and once it's spent, it cannot be returned. The danger isn't in compassion. it's in blindness. When victimhood becomes a tool, accountability disappears. And in that silence, real damage hides. Not the kind that breaks bones, but the kind that shapes stories. The kind that rewrites memory. The kind that controls outcomes while pretending not to hold any power at all. There is a kind of strength that doesn't announce itself. It hides in what appears delicate, helpless, even naive. Fragility, when performed convincingly, draws in protection, patience, and obedience. It creates an environment where others feel responsible for your stability, and in doing so, it grants a quiet power, because nothing is more binding than the fear of causing harm to someone who seems unable to bear it. This mask does not scream or threaten. It whispers. It lowers its gaze. It shakes instead of shouting. And yet, it bends the world around it. People walk softer, speak more carefully. They pause before disagreeing, censor themselves before criticizing. The fear isn't of being wrong, it's of being seen as cruel. Because if she breaks, it's your fault. If she cries, you're the villain. If she falters, you must have pushed too hard. Her weakness becomes your guilt. But the illusion is not in the display. The illusion is in the assumption that fragility means harmlessness, that trembling hands can't hold control, that soft voices don't shape hard consequences. What looks like vulnerability can just as easily be a tool, a way to evade accountability, to escape responsibility, or to render others powerless under the weight of their own conscience. It's not always calculated. It can be instinctive, learned over time, rewarded again and again by a world that equates softness with virtue. But the result is the same. Those who appear fragile are rarely confronted. They are protected, defended, believed, often without question. And behind that curtain of perceived weakness lies an undeniable leverage, the ability to alter behavior, bend judgment, and steer situations, all without raising a hand. Sometimes, the most effective form of control is simply convincing the world that you have none. Not all wars are loud. Some are fought behind smiles, beneath compliments, and within the careful orchestration of presence. While male rivalry often manifests in open conflict, female competition, especially among women themselves, can be far more concealed. It's not about brute force, but positioning. Not about domination, but exclusion. The arena is social, emotional, aesthetic, and the currency is attention. In this unspoken contest, power doesn't lie in confrontation, but in subtlety. A glance too long, a compliment with teeth, an invitation that leaves someone out. These are not accidents. They're strategies, crafted in silence, carried out without declaration. Every word, every gesture, every absence is loaded with intention. But because nothing is said outright, there is no proof, only implication, only the chilling awareness that something has shifted, and you cannot name it. Beneath the surface of unity and empowerment, the struggle for visibility persists. Who is seen first? Who is heard? Who is wanted, envied, remembered? These are the stakes. And the higher a woman climbs in beauty, status, or influence, the more invisible rules she must learn to play by. Because the competition doesn't disappear with success, it only becomes more refined. The danger lies in misunderstanding this kind of conflict. It isn't less destructive just because it lacks violence. It wounds differently. It isolates, alienates, undermines. It plants doubt where there was confidence, insecurity where there was ease. And because it's unspoken, it can't be challenged directly. To name it is to look paranoid. To defend against it is to seem insecure. The victim often appears unstable, while the instigator remains untouched. In this hidden battleground, Silence is the weapon, charm is the armor, and social intelligence determines survival. It is not less ruthless because it is quiet. It is ruthless because it is quiet. There is a story we've told ourselves, passed down in lectures, films, and declarations of progress. A story where equality means sameness, where harmony is achieved through the erasure of difference, and where to question this is to betray empathy itself. It is a comforting tale, one in which women are always victims of history, and men always the beneficiaries of oppression, one where malice is masculine and innocence feminine. It flatters our hopes. It shields us from the discomfort of complexity, and it spares us from responsibility for the darker truths that still breathe beneath the surface. But what if this story was never neutral? What if, by refusing to see how power operates through softness, suggestion, and emotional leverage, we have simply traded one form of dominance for another? We dismantled the old hierarchy, but in its ruins built a new mythology, one where manipulation wears the face of virtue, where influence hides behind tears, and where destruction is administered not with fists, but with insinuations. We do not question these tools because they do not resemble violence. We celebrate them. We call it intuition. We call it emotional intelligence. We call it resilience. But when the same tools are used to ostracize, to control, to destroy reputations, or reshape reality, we look away. We refuse to believe that harm can come wrapped in warmth, that cruelty can smile, that dominance can speak in whispers. We are so desperate to believe in equality that we've lost the courage to see inequality where it now hides. Not in the boardroom, not in the law, but in the narratives we protect, the behaviors we excuse, the truths we bury to preserve the comfort of the lie. So the question remains, what happens when deception no longer looks like power, but like innocence?